Fiona and we're on Electric Daisy Flower Farm in Somerset. I'm a flower grower and we grow here on 2.5 acres. We are in the process of getting our organic certification. I came to flower growing slightly late in life, so it's sort of my second career. I've been an artist all my life and I've done all sorts of various and different things. And when I came to the end of a job curating for a big arts organisation, I decided I needed to do something completely different. And I took an RHS course, a level 2 RHS. And after a year learning how to grow things, I thought this is what I want to do next with my life. I didn't immediately have a flower farm. I started with my own garden, a patch in my father's, another patch at my mother's. I just used any space I could to grow flowers in. I ended up renting a space in a farm, a local farm, in their walled garden. So I took over the walled garden and bit by bit I just filled it with flowers. I started with a huge bed of cornflowers and I progressed until the whole wall garden was full of flowers. But my first crop, that first huge bed of cornflowers, it came and it flowered and it looked spectacular, and I thought, that's it, I'm a flower farmer. And then I took my beautiful cornflowers to the local florists, and I rocked up with this van full of cornflowers that I picked and prepared, and absolutely beautiful. And none of the florists were really interested. A couple bought a few stems of cornflowers. Some said they might want some in a couple of weeks' time. And of course, selling a couple of bunches of cornflowers does not make you a flower farmer. It does not make you a business. And the florists who wanted flowers in a couple of weeks' time, that was no good because my cornflowers had gone over by then. They'd gone over and was a pile of compost by that point. So it's a long, hard slog learning how to grow flowers through the seasons so that you always have enough for every occasion. We're in the multi-span polytunnel, which is a game changer for flower farmers. We've got 4 bays here and each bay is 20 metres long, which means we've got wonderful space to grow huge amounts of flowers. These zinnias have just been planted a week ago, but in a couple of months' time they'll be up here. These bed heads are where we stretch the netting that goes to the end and the flowers grow through it. Apart from extending the seasons, being able to grow things at the beginning and at the end of season, it's also amazing to have a covered space, because if you grow everything in the field, you quite often get bad damage from storms, from rain, and it's just really, really good to have your blooms covered when they come to the optimum time of harvesting. My business has evolved in probably a different way to anybody else's business because of my arts background. So very early on I realised that my USP was how I presented myself visually. My daughter's a photographer, so she was like my secret weapon. And I realised that I had to show the flowers in an innovative way, a way that nobody else had displayed their flowers before. So my daughter used to come and photograph. She came once a month because we were documenting growing of flowers, and we were trying to show the seasonality of British flowers. We're trying to show that what we can grow in this country so that you don't have to import flowers. And we were taking photographs of individual flowers, we were taking photographs of bouquets, but one day my son walked in and I just happened to have a huge bucket of dahlias that the florist didn't want. So I brought back this big bucket of dahlias, and there was my son and the dahlias. I thought, ooh, I know. And I had a headband and some gaffer tape, and I strapped these dahlias to the headband, plonked them on my son's head, and that was a calendar born. So that was July. He was Mr. July, and he is the first pin-up man with flowers on his head. And then my daughter and I did 3 years of calendars. So each month she came and we photographed what was in season, what was fresh, what was the best on the farm that month. That's how I got recognised, by doing something really different, and I think it was quite original. We've been through several different versions of a business model for getting our flowers to our customers. We did think of doing postal delivery, sending our bouquets out in boxes, but as you can see, our flowers are fairly fragile and flippy floppy, which is how I like them to be. I like them to be have their own life and not to be straight stemmed. So the flowers that generally come through the post have come from Holland, and they're grown specifically to be really straight, to have really good vase life. You can transport them for hours or days probably out of water, and they are grown specifically for that. Ours are grown more for their vibrancy and their naturalness. So we decided against the postal system. And then we also decided against giving them to a delivery company. So what we do now is people either collect from the shop or from the farm, or we deliver. We have our own man who delivers in our van. Yeah, as a flower farmer, there's many different ways of going. So you can grow your flowers as a crop, and you can harvest them and sell them at wholesalers, who then sell them on to the florists. Or you can sell the flowers direct to the florist. That's slightly better because you make a little bit more money. Then next one is you can sell them to your customers. You can have clients, but you could sell them in buckets, so you don't have to do anything. You pick the flowers and you sell them in a bucket to the customer. So if you're selling at the wholesaler, you get the bottom price. The florist, you get slightly higher price. Your customer, higher than the florist. And then if you can do something with your flowers, so if you have floristry skills, you can use your flowers and turn them into a bouquet, or a wedding flowers, or an arrangement, or something spectacular. And that's where you make the most money with your flowers. So it's the added value that you put on the flowers that you've grown. This is the heart of the flower farm. Here we are in the Keeder. This is a special polytunnel where we do all of the propagation for the flower farm. And here we have Jane. Hello. Who is head of propagation. And here she is pricking out digitalis, and we've taken it now out of the seed tray, and she's potting it on into these small pots. And that will go until the autumn. We'll plant it out in the autumn. Everybody loves a sweet pea, but they are quite tricky to grow. They're very hungry, they need a lot of feeding, and this year we've tried to grow ours on the cordon method, which is where you just take one stem and take it up your string and cut off all the side shoots. So they take an awful lot of maintenance to get the sweet pea of your dreams. But unfortunately, you don't get very much money for your sweet peas. So you can put in a huge amount of effort into growing sweet peas, and there's not much return, except they're very sentimentally useful. So we do still grow them, and we love them because they smell gorgeous and they are just the most lovely flower, but you don't make money growing sweet peas. So we're incredibly lucky in this age to have social media. Social media is our friend. For floristry, for flower growers, for flower sellers, it is our friend. We can tell our story through Instagram, through Facebook, through Twitter, and we can have Pinterest. There are many different ways that we can tell the story of the flowers we are growing. And people are desperate to learn about flower growing, they're desperate to learn about floristry, and they're really, really interested in our journey. So social media is absolutely our friend. Instagram is amazing. You all need to be using Instagram. It's really easy to grow flowers, actually. Anyone can grow flowers, but selling the flowers is hard. So it's about marketing yourself. You have to market yourself. You have to show the best version of your flowers, the most beautiful flowers you've grown. They've got to be the freshest, in the best condition, and you can show that on free social media, so you are in control of showing that. But it is work, and it's different work. It's not the same as growing. You have to compartmentalize your life. The growing life is one part of it. The media presence, the showing what you do, is a completely different part of it. Obviously they are connected, but they are two different parts. You have to have two different hats on, and telling the story is the most important part of your business. So my business started very small. It started in my garden, in my kitchen, and I've been running for 6 years now, and this is the first year that I've actually got out of the kitchen. I now have my own barn. It's not quite ready yet, but I do have my own space. So it's taken me 6 years to find my own workspace. I have been picking all my flowers, taking them home, doing all the work, all the conditioning, all of the floristry in my kitchen. But the point is that you can start very small, and everybody should start small. And as you grow, you realise what you're doing. So you probably will go through many different iterations of what you think you're going to be doing. I thought I was just going to grow the flowers, but of course it's not just the growing flowers for me, it's what I do with the flowers. So that's the bit that really excites me. So it's incremental. It's taken me 6 years to get to this point. And I think it's actually really important. It's been important for me to go slowly on my journey, not to rush into it. Although I knew I was going to have a flower farm, and I called myself a flower farm, Electric Daisy Flower Farm, it's taken me probably 6 years to catch up with my own branding. So now I have a barn and I have my own patch of land. 3 years ago we bought a field, and it was just an empty pasture field, and we've turned it into a 2.5 acre flower farm. When we chose this piece of land, it was really because it had a barn on it. It was a 3-sided barn, and it overlooked this whole field. And I kind of immediately could see that that was how I could lay my flower fields. So we've got a motorway going through the middle here, and off the motorway we have the A roads and the B roads. And as the land slopes gently down, we have different beds to plant different flowers in. So at the top of the field it's drier, but as it goes down incrementally it gets wetter and wetter. We are on a clay substrate, and at the bottom it gets really quite waterlogged in the winter. It's as much about biodiversity flower farming. So this kind of, we're growing salvia here, which the bees absolutely love. And this goes on flowering for at least 6 weeks. So we'll be able to harvest this until the whole bed is emptied. And then over on this side, we've got the cardoons. Cardoon is an amazing crop. We've used the leaves from as early as January this year. We were harvesting leaves from this to use in the bouquets, and now you can see it's growing, and it'll have these giant thistle-like flowers on it, and they are really architectural and dramatic, so they'll go down a storm in London. Flower farms are like orchestras. It's up and down, so it's never all in flower at the same time. You've got beds that you've just planted, beds that you've just ripped out. Things change all the time. So here we have the dahlia bed, and that we have to tend it, but it won't come into flower until the end of the summer, sort of end of August, beginning of September. And behind me we've got the scabious bed, and this is just coming into flower now. These are perennial scabious, and they will flower through the summer. They'll get taller and taller. It's very much like being on a merry-go-round, and you have to catch the moment as your flowers go round. As a business model, I've got a flower farm in the middle of the country. So in the country, everybody has a garden. Most people have a garden, and they all grow their own flowers. So they're not really that interested in my garden flowers, because they're quite similar to the flowers they've got themselves. That's not completely true, but it's not a big market here. But if I look at my Instagram followers, I can look at the insights, and I can see that 90% of my followers live in London. They're young women, and they most probably work in offices, and so they dream of this life of flower farmers. So I am speaking to these young women in London, and after a while I realised that because my audience is in London, that's where I should sell my flowers. And then I was incredibly fortunate that I was invited to open a shop in London. So that's what we've done. This year we've opened a shop in London, and all of our flowers are picked in Somerset and are taken to our shop. So we sell all of our flowers in the shop in London. In my research year, I went and visited lots of different flower farms in the UK, and a memorable one is Green and Gorgeous, and I remember talking to Ash about his compost pile, and Ash had a huge compost pile, obviously because you need it for all the flowers, and he told me he really wished he'd had hard standing under his compost pile. So I noted that down and I banked that piece of information. And when we finally got our forever home, our piece of land, our field, the first thing I did was the compost bins. And I didn't just do any compost bins. We took ages designing these compost bins. In this bin here, you see we've got all these beautiful poppies growing. This is where we get the municipal compost delivered. That's the green waste that the council collects, and then they make it into this municipal compost that comes in a massive dumper truck. So we get like 13 tons dumped of municipal compost. So that's why this bay is quite a large bay. We've made them open-ended so that you can collect the compost from either end. You can come at it from either end, and that's been really useful. This bay here is full of the actual waste from the flowers. So once the flowers have stopped flowering, they're cut down. It's quite brutal, and all of the green matter is composted here. So that will be the first year compost bin, and it will be turned any minute now. It will be turned, so the underneath of this compost bin will be really lovely earth, and this will get turned into the bin next to it, and that will mean that the green matter is at the bottom and the lovely soil is at the top. And at that point we will cover the whole thing in pumpkins. So last year we had an amazing crop of pumpkins growing on top of the compost that was still composting, and then this year we got to use that beautiful compost on our beds. So the fourth and final bay has got wood chip in it. We have made friends with all of the tree surgeons in the area, and they come whenever they've done a job and they've made all their wood chippings. They're desperate to get rid of them, so they're very, very happy to bring them here. And this is free wood chip, which we use on the paths between all the beds, and then once it's been on the beds for a couple of years, it then goes into the earth as a kind of green compost. So this is an incredibly important resource, and it's free and it's beautiful. These beautiful larkspur, they're all in these lovely colours. I absolutely love this bed, it looks extraordinary. But of course, filming on a flower farm, you shouldn't really be seeing any flowers. These flowers should be picked and harvested. They're at the optimum stage now. They should be in our shop in London. But of course, we're in the year of COVID-19 and nothing's moving, nothing's shifting, which means we get to enjoy the beauty of our flowers, but it's a bit devastating business-wise. Of course, I feel like I've made a terrible mistake just having one basket to put my eggs in. So I've got the shop in London and the flowers here. And now with COVID-19, the shop's closed, so I have nowhere to send my flowers. So I've had to revisit all my local connections, and I now do sell bouquets locally, which is a lovely thing to be doing anyway. It's not that I didn't want to do that, it was just that the model came up and I accepted. But now I am selling locally as well. And so I think it's actually, for me, that was a big lesson. I need to learn not to just have one outlet. You have to think of different ways of selling your flowers, different ways of getting your flowers to people. I've found that whoever I talk to about being a flower farmer, they're interested. Everyone's fascinated and wants to know more. So I find the best way to get business is to talk to whoever you meet and be excited and inspired about what you're doing. You have to be your own ambassador. So whoever you meet, you talk to. You can go to those business breakfasts if that's what you think is a good idea. You just have to network with everybody you meet. People in the streets, people in the shops. You never know who you are going to meet. Quite often sitting next to somebody on the train, I'll strike up a conversation and you make a connection through that. And then you get one piece of work, and then the next thing comes. So I had a job with Joe Malone Jo Malone, the perfume company, they came to the flower farm and they spent the day with me picking flowers, and I showed them how to arrange and do things, and they had a wonderful day. They loved it. Nothing from that, nothing came out of it at all except that one day. And then 2 years later, and actually 3 years later, somebody who was on that day with Jo Malone has moved to a different company, Penhaligon's, and he remembered the lovely day he had on my flower farm, and he now has come with Penhaligon's to the flower farm. So it's not what you know, it's who you know, and you have to keep talking, keep telling your story, keep being excited, keep being inspired, and people will come and visit you. People will be interested, they want to know more. Flower farming is pretty hard work, it's long hours and often in difficult conditions. I talk about horticulture as being like snakes and ladders. You'll do some task and you feel as if you've got up the longest ladder and you feel really pleased with yourself, and then the next throw of the dice you're sliding back down the snake and right back down on your hands and knees working out what happened. For example, one year we found a magic mulch that was cardboard, and we planted all our annuals to this amazing mulch, and we stood back and felt so pleased with ourselves. We arrived the next day after a storm had ripped through the farm and tossed all the mulch all across the farm, so you're back down the snake again. So it can be quite disheartening. It's hard and it's quite difficult. So it's really important, we found, to belong to a community of flower farmers. So we're members of Flowers from the Farm, and in fact through the Instagram we talk to lots of flower farmers as well. And that's really important to remember that we're all going up the snakes, or we're all going up the ladders and coming down the snakes. We all do it maybe at different times, but we're all doing it. And it's really important to share stories of triumphs and disappointment. In my business, it's very broad. So I've got these huge muddy fields full of flowers, and you have to dig and do lots of very grunting kind of work, lots of heaving and hefting and moving of gravel and mud. But the floristry part is at the other end of the spectrum. I talk about changing your shoes as you get to, so when you get to the floristry end, it's a very different deal. At this end, we're talking about the detail, so it's all about stripping back the leaves and having the best flower. And I think about presenting my flowers and all the products that I have, it's all about the detail. So because I'm environmental, I'm growing everything completely organically without any herbicide or pesticide, and I am not treating any of the flowers with any preservatives when they're picked. They're just conditioned in water. It's really important to me that I'm not using plastic. So we've designed our own flower pots. These are called long toms. It's a Victorian design, and we get them made in Bath in a pottery, the Willow Pottery, and they've got our logo on, and on the back it's got the pottery where they're made. So this is really important, that we're not selling our plants or our things in plastic pots. We're selling them in ceramic pots. And then when we sell the flowers in the shop, we're using these tins. Instead of aqua packing them in plastic cellophane, we use these tins, so our customers leave the shop with their flowers in a tin that they can either recycle or bring back to the shop. And it's the same with our bags and our packaging. We've used the images that my daughter took, so we've got lovely images of flowers that we've turned into the bags that we used, and they're all in recycled paper so that they can be put into the compost at the end. So the idea is that your bouquet is not causing any harm to anyone. There's no bad byproduct of your bouquet. You can compost it and recycle any of the things that we used to pack it. Our rose garden is getting bigger and bigger. I think we've got over 1,000 roses now, but these are the first ones we planted. The next ones are not quite as big. And we've got all sorts of roses for different occasions. You need different colours and different scents for different reasons. So some are good for bouquets, some are good for wedding work, but they are all absolutely gorgeous. I totally fell in love with roses when I first started growing them. There's just something so luxurious and just feel good about roses. My life as a flower farmer is not always a bed of roses. There are real ups and downs, but I wouldn't change it for the world. It's a wonderful thing to be doing, and it exercises my brain. I'm always having to find ways to solve problems and to work out how to get the business moving forward. It's a fascinating subject, always will be. So I think the future is bright for sustainable, ecological, organic flowers. I think the future for flower growing in the UK is bright.